The Stormcloaks began as little more than whispers in the frozen taverns of Windhelm, spoken quietly by men who felt the Empire had drifted too far from the people it once protected. Those early conversations were not speeches or rallying cries, just the tired confessions of Nords who believed their homeland had grown smaller under foreign rule. In those humble beginnings, the rebellion was less a political movement and more a feeling like a cold draft slipping through an old hall, reminding everyone inside that something had changed without them noticing. The mood of the city shifted long before the banners ever did, as if Windhelm itself sensed the first embers of the uprising before the people dared speak the truth aloud. Ulfric Stormcloak's rise didn't begin with a crown, but with a voice. His mastery of the Thu'um made him both feared and admired, but what most outsiders never understood was that his power frightened even him. The shout he used in the duel against High King Torrig echoed through the hearts of his followers, not because it killed a ruler, but because it proved that ancient forces still lived inside Nordic blood. To the Stormcloaks, it wasn't the power of the voice that mattered. It was the idea that the soul of Skyrim had awakened, using Ulfric as its speaker. In the long halls of Windhelm's Palace of the Kings, the air holds the scent of old pine and cold stone. Every soldier who walks its floors feels the weight of history pressing against their shoulders. The walls are lined with carvings honoring ancestors who stood against invaders long before the Empire existed, and many Stormcloaks swear they can feel those spirits watching over them. The palace is less a headquarters and more a sanctuary for memory, a place where the past stands just as proudly as the men and women preparing to fight for the future. Many who join the Stormcloaks do so quietly. There are no great ceremonies or declarations, only a nod from a steward and a simple assignment. New recruits often begin by carrying supplies, patching armor, or helping fortify Windhelm's aging walls. These early tasks are purposeful. Ulfric believes every soldier should know the weight of the city they defend. The cold winds of Eastmarch make the work feel harsher, but also purifying, like the land itself is testing the resolve of each new arrival. Inside Candlehearth Hall, the fire is always burning, and the innkeeper proudly keeps it lit for the memory of her parents. Stormcloaks gather here after long patrols, their armor steaming as snow melts off the steel. They speak in hushed tones about patrol routes, the state of the city gates, and rumors from the south. Even laughter is reserved, as if the walls themselves understand the fragile calm that sits on the edge of a civil war. Yet there's warmth there, a shared understanding that even weary rebels deserve a moment of peace beside the hearth. Stormcloak scouts travel far beyond Eastmarch, mapping enemy movements, tracking caravans, and studying Imperial patrol patterns. They often travel alone, their steps muffled by snowdrifts and fog. These scouts become the silent observers of Skyrim, watching the land with the eyes of hunters rather than soldiers. Many write notes in simple leather journals, recording the behavior of wildlife, the thickness of the ice on rivers, and where merchants tend to camp. These details become vital, shaping the strategy of battles that most citizens never know were avoided. In Windhelm's market district, the presence of the rebellion can be felt in subtler ways. Merchants stand closer to their stalls, guards linger near the gate, and the sound of the forge rings a little louder as blacksmiths work to keep weapons sharp. Even the children playing in the snow mimic Stormcloak drills, swinging sticks like swords and shouting imaginary battle cries. The city's heartbeat has aligned with the rhythm of war, though many hope the fighting never reaches their doors. The Stormcloak's armor, with its distinct bear fur shawl, carries symbolism that goes deeper than appearance. The fur represents the strength and resilience of the Nordic people creatures who endure harsh winters and survive by will alone. Soldiers often take pride in earning the right to wear it, seeing it not just as armor, but as a connection to their ancestors. Some even stitch small runes inside the fur, prayers or names of loved ones, carrying personal reminders into every conflict. The rebellion's camps spread across Skyrim like islands of frostbitten hope. Each camp has its own rhythm, blacksmiths hammering before dawn, tired soldiers returning from snowy patrols, and the crackle of fire cutting through the night air. In these places, the world becomes small and quiet. Soldiers share stories over salted meats, carve small wooden charms to pass the time, and warm their hands over flames while discussing what life might look like after the war. Even in the uncertainty of battle, there's camaraderie and a sense of being part of something larger than themselves. Stormcloak officers spend their evenings reviewing maps illuminated by lantern light, tracing their fingers along mountain passes and river valleys. They study each region's weather patterns, knowing that a blizzard or avalanche can be more decisive than any blade. These officers often sleep only a few hours at a time, resting in short intervals between strategy sessions. Their dedication gives the rebellion structure, turning scattered fighters into an organized force capable of challenging an empire. Despite their hardened reputation, many Stormcloak soldiers admit that they fear the silence before battle more than the battle itself. In those quiet moments, when snow falls without sound and breath hangs motionless in the air, doubt creeps in. They wonder about their families back home, about the lives they left behind to fight for something as intangible as freedom. Yet when the horn calls, those worries melt away, replaced by instinct and the unspoken promise to protect the land they love. Windhelm's city gates are reinforced with heavy Nordic timbers, repaired countless times through the years. Stormcloak guards stand watch here day and night, their breath-forming clouds that drift into the frigid air. Some guards name the ravens that perch on the battlements, calling them silent companions who witness every changing of the shift. These small rituals bring comfort in a city that spends most of its time bracing for what comes next. The rebellion spreads through Skyrim, not through fear, but through stories. Tales of Nord heroes fighting giants, facing dragons, and resisting invaders circulate around campfires. Recruits cling to these legends, drawing courage from the idea that they walk the same paths as mythic figures of old. For the Stormcloaks, every footstep on the snowy earth feels like a tribute to those who came before. Even the snow seems to move differently in Stormcloak territory. Drifts gather in thicker piles along the roads to Windhelm, and the wind carries a sharper edge, as if the land itself is reminding travelers where their loyalties lie. When soldiers march, their boots crunch rhythmically through the frost, a steady beat that echoes across the tundra. That sound becomes a kind of anthem, a quiet reminder that Skyrim remains alive even in its coldest hours. Every Stormcloak soldier carries a small piece of Skyrim with them, sometimes literally. Some keep small stones from their home province. Others press dried mountain flowers into their journals. These tokens act as anchors, grounding them to the land that shaped their hearts. In moments of uncertainty, they look at these keepsakes and remember why they fight. The Stormcloak Rebellion didn't begin with the sound of swords clashing or horns echoing across the mountains. It started quietly, in the cold corridors of old Nordic halls, with conversations spoken in low voices and the weight of history resting on every word. Long before battle banners were raised, there was a slow shift in the hearts of the people, farmers, hunters, and city folk who felt the land unchanged while the world around them grew unfamiliar. The rebellion began as a feeling before it ever became a movement. It was the sense that Skyrim's winter winds carried memories too old to ignore, and that those memories were calling out for someone to answer them. Ulfric Stormcloak himself is often seen as the spark, but his rise was far more complicated than simple heroism or ambition. When he trained with the Greybeards in his youth, he was taught a philosophy of humility, but something within him responded to the power of the voice with a different intensity. He learned words not as meditation, but as weapons, each syllable carving itself into his identity like markings on stone. Even after he left High Hrothgar, that influence clung to him, the calm discipline of the mountain struggling against the fire inside his own heart. It created a leader both revered and doubted, a man shaped by echoes he could never fully silence. Windhelm, the Stormcloak capital, reflects that duality perfectly. The city is ancient, its stone walls thick with the weight of centuries, and its torches burn with a defiant golden glow that never seems to fade. But beneath that warmth, the streets carry an undercurrent of frost, the same frost that forms when old wounds meet new conflict. Even the palace itself, with its long tables and banners hanging like frozen waves of blue cloth, feels like a place where history sits watching from the shadows. Every footstep in those halls sounds louder than it should, as if the stones themselves are listening for what comes next. Many believe Stormcloak soldiers are unified by a single purpose, but in truth, every man and woman who joins brings a different story. Some enlist because they believe the Empire abandoned Skyrim's people during the Great War. Others join because the worship of Talos being restricted felt like losing a part of their identity, and others simply fight because their families have fought for generations, the call of battle woven into their blood. The rebellion is a quilt of these stories stitched together, uneven, imperfect, but undeniably human. The blue war paint worn by many Stormcloaks isn't just decoration. Its design draws from old Nordic funerary patterns, originally meant to guide the spirits of warriors across the Sea of Ghosts. Wearing it into battle invokes both ancestors and destiny, a reminder that every blow struck is part of a lineage stretching back to the early days of Ysgramor. The designs differ slightly between holds, meaning a soldier from Whiterun may carry a different ancestral symbol than one from the Pale, even if they stand side by side. The rebellion carries many pasts within a single present. Stormcloak camps are not organized like imperial camps, where the Empire builds structures with precision and uniformity. Stormcloak camps grow organically, shaped by the land around them. Tents nestled beside boulders, cooking fires built near natural windbreaks, and supply crates arranged in patterns that make sense only to those who live there. The camps feel less like military outposts and more like temporary villages, places where soldiers sleep beside old friends and share stories over mead that's passed from hand to hand until the bottle runs dry. In the quiet hours before dawn, the camps feel almost peaceful, lit only by the soft glow of dying embers. The rebellion's messengers play a crucial but often overlooked role. They travel lightly and silently, moving across frozen roads at night when detection is hardest. Some carve secret waypoints into trees, tiny runes hidden beneath bark, marking paths that only Stormcloaks recognize. These runes translate to simple instructions like safe, watch, or follow the river. When snow covers the world and all roads vanish, these hidden marks become whispers carrying the rebellion forward. Another detail rarely noticed is how Stormcloak armor subtly changes depending on where it's crafted. Armor made in Eastmarch tends to have darker leather and slightly thicker fur lining to withstand the stronger winds. Armor from the Pale often incorporates wolf pelts because of the region's abundant wildlife, and armor forged in Windhelm carries a faint blue dye mixed into the leather, a tradition meant to bless the wearer with the strength of the city itself. Though unified in appearance, each set of armor holds the spirit of its birthplace. Stormcloak blacksmiths take pride in crafting weapons through traditional Nordic methods. Instead of using purely imperial forging techniques, they incorporate old rituals, cooling blades in snow rather than water, or heating metal with slow-burning coals instead of high flames. These methods produce weapons that feel heavier and slightly unbalanced, but to Stormcloaks, that weight symbolizes the honesty of their craft. Every sword is imperfect in a way that feels intentional, as though the steel remembers the struggle that shaped it. One of the most unique Stormcloak traditions involves sending letters home even when there is no guarantee they will reach their destination. Soldiers write messages during long nights, stories of battles survived, regrets carried, or hopes for the future, and seal them with wax marked by their unit's symbol. These letters are placed into a special chest in each camp, and once a month, a courier gathers them for delivery. Many are never received, but the act of writing is what matters. It gives each soldier a moment to exist beyond war, to imagine a future still waiting for them somewhere beyond the horizon. While Stormcloaks are known for their fierce independence, there is a deep sense of unity among them that doesn't always show in public. Around their fires, they share not only food and drink but also old songs, melodies carried through generations. Some songs are battle chants, others are lullabies, and some are quiet hymns dedicated to Talos. In these moments, the rebellion feels less like a political movement and more like a family bound by memories rather than orders. Even the Stormcloak horses have their place in the rebellion. Many mounts are bred in the northern holds, hardened by ice and long winters. These horses are strong, shaggy, and resilient, able to travel through blizzards where imperial breeds would falter. A Stormcloak cavalry charge may be rare, but when it happens, the sight of frost-covered horses thundering across a battlefield becomes a symbol of the North's untamed spirit. The rebellion's supply lines are more fragile than many realize. Instead of large caravans, Stormcloaks rely on local supporters who hide food beneath floorboards or pass medicines through coded phrases in markets. A merchant in Whiterun might say, "The wind is colder today," to signal that the next shipment of arrows is ready. These covert acts of loyalty weave a hidden network beneath the surface of everyday life. A quiet army of civilians who never lift a sword but support the rebellion with unwavering resolve. In quieter corners of Skyrim, children reenact battles using sticks as swords. Some pretend to be Stormcloaks, others Imperials. But in the game's files, voice lines exist of children chanting, "For Skyrim," a line that was never implemented. These unused lines suggest that the rebellion's influence runs deeper than the battlefield. It reaches into the imaginations of younger generations, shaping the stories they will one day tell about the land they inherited. And while the Stormcloaks fight for what they believe is right, even they carry doubts. Alone on watch at night, some soldiers stare across the tundra and wonder whether the path they walk leads to freedom or simply deeper conflict. These moments of introspection never appear in quests or dialogues, but the world itself, in its quiet, lonely stretches of snow and moonlight, captures the emotional truth of the rebellion. Skyrim is both beautiful and burdened, and its people carry that duality with them into every choice they make. The Stormcloak Rebellion carries an undercurrent of quiet conviction, a kind of determination that feels older than the conflict itself. Even before Ulfric took up his axe and declared war on the Empire, there were murmurs in the taverns of Eastmarch, whispers exchanged between weary farmers who felt the weight of foreign rule pressing on the back of their necks like an unwanted hand. Those murmurs grew louder every winter, each snowfall dusting the cities with a sense of inevitability, as if Skyrim itself were preparing its people for a storm that had been building for generations. In Windhelm, the rebel capital, the air itself seems to hold memory. Snow drifts through the courtyard with a sense of purpose, swirling past ancient stone that has stood watch since long before Talos's ascension. The Windhelm guards who patrol those halls move with a rhythm that feels practiced, almost ritualistic. Many of them are sons and grandsons of veterans from earlier skirmishes against the Thalmor, men who were raised with stories of injustice whispered to them like bedtime warnings. Some of those guards wear armor handed down through 3 generations, the metal carrying dents from battles fought long before they were born. Each mark becomes part of the soldier's identity, a quiet reminder that the rebellion is more than a moment, it's a legacy. Inside the Palace of the Kings, the walls absorb conversations like sponges, holding on to the voices of those who have vowed to reclaim their homeland. The Great Hall's torches cast long shadows across the stone, shadows that sway like banners caught in a wind only they can feel. Ulfric's throne stands elevated but plain, carved from dark stone rather than gilded with wealth. It reflects the man himself, simple in appearance but heavy with purpose. There's no excess, no softness. The throne is as cold and resolute as the ideals it represents. When Stormcloak soldiers swear their oath, they do it in a ceremony that many outsiders never witness. The ritual is simple, spoken in low, steady voices, each recruit declaring loyalty not just to Ulfric but to Skyrim itself. They speak of defending their ancestors' sacred ground, of protecting the freedom to worship the gods as they choose, of ensuring their children grow up without chains disguised as treaties. The ceremony ends with each soldier touching the hilt of a ceremonial axe, a symbolic reminder that the right to fight and the right to govern oneself are intertwined in the blood of the Nords. Travelers who pass through Eastmarch often feel the tension before they see the banners. The land itself seems to hum with anticipation, the crackle of volcanic vents, the distant roar of Windhelm's gates opening, the echo of marching boots along snowy roads. Even the animals behave differently. Wolves skirt the edges of Stormcloak camps, not out of fear, but out of respect for the steady beat of war that pulses through the land. Horses snort restlessly, sensing the fervor of the men who tend them. Ravens circle overhead, as if watching history unfold one campfire at a time. Stormcloak camps are arranged with surprising organization. Every tent has its place, every soldier a specific duty. The air constantly carries the scent of wood smoke and boiled snowberries, a makeshift stew that has become a familiar comfort to weary fighters. At night, when the fires crackle and the cold tightens around the camp, the rebels speak in low voices about home, about families waiting behind frozen windows, about sons too young to understand war, about daughters learning songs about Talos on their grandmother's knee. The rebellion is built not on hatred, but on longing, a deep ache to return to a world where Nords were free to live and worship without fear. One of the lesser-known traditions among Stormcloak scouts is the carving of runes into trees along hidden travel routes. These runes aren't magical, though some believe they carry blessings from ancient heroes. They serve as silent signals, guiding scouts through blizzards, marking safe paths across ice, or warning of Imperial patrols. Each rune serves its purpose without a sound, as every Stormcloak knows that words can be carried on the wind, but carved symbols endure even through the harshest storms. Windhelm's marketplace, often bustling with life, becomes a completely different place after dark. When the lanterns burn low and merchants shutter their stalls, the plaza rests beneath an almost sacred stillness. Some of the Stormcloak soldiers take their nightly patrols through this space, boots crunching on thin frost as they watch over the sleeping city. Their presence brings comfort to the loyalists and unease to those who still cling to the Empire. But to the guards themselves, the silence is a reminder of why they fight to protect streets where children run freely, to guard the warmth of hearths where families gather without fear of foreign interference. Many Stormcloak soldiers carry little trinkets with them, small personal charms tucked inside armor or tied to belt loops. Some keep locks of their child's hair, others tie scraps of fabric from their mother's shawl to their weapons. One soldier is said to carry a piece of the jagged stone from Helgen's ruins, a reminder of the day the dragon attacked and the Empire nearly executed an innocent man simply for being in the wrong place. These keepsakes act as anchors, grounding them during the chaos of battle. There's a quiet understanding among the rebels that not every Nord supports their cause. Some oppose the rebellion, believing unity with the Empire is necessary for survival. Stormcloaks know this, and it weighs on them. Rebellion is messy, filled with choices that carve scars across the land and across families. Brothers have found themselves on opposite sides of the war, meeting on the battlefield with heavy hearts and lowered blades, neither wanting to be the one who strikes first. These conflicts become stories whispered in the halls of Windhelm, tales that remind the rebels that their fight is not against their own people, but against a system they believe stifles the soul of Skyrim. Deep beneath the palace lies a war room lined with maps, parchments, and markers showing troop movements. The candles placed there are never allowed to burn out. When one wick dies, another is lit immediately. The flame represents the spirit of the rebellion, always flickering, always alive, always pushing back against the darkness pressing in around it. Commanders gather in that chamber at all hours, their armor clinking softly as they lean over charts of forts, supply lines, and ambush routes. Voices raised in strategy echo through stone hallways like distant thunder. Stormcloak armor, though simple, is forged with care. The furs woven into their pauldrons are taken from local animals, wolves, bears, sometimes even saber cats. These furs aren't just for warmth, they carry symbolism. The wolf represents unity, the bear represents strength, and the saber cat represents unbroken resolve. Each warrior wears these emblems with pride, knowing their armor ties them not only to their cause, but to the wild land they fight for. In the barracks of Windhelm, there's an old mural barely visible behind layers of soot and age. It depicts a line of Nords standing defiantly before a towering foe, their weapons glowing as if fueled by the spirit of the land. The mural isn't referenced in any book or known legend. Some believe it portrays an ancient battle against the dragons. Others think it's a symbolic depiction of the eternal struggle for freedom. Whatever the truth, the mural remains, resting in shadow, a silent reminder that every Nord carries the weight of history across their shoulders. During long marches through the snowy wilderness, Stormcloak soldiers keep their spirits up with songs passed down through generations. These aren't battle chants, but haunting melodies that drift through the trees like the wind itself is humming along. Some of the tunes speak of lost loves, others of distant homesteads atop cliffs overlooking the sea. Even Imperial scouts who hear these songs admit they sound less like war ballads and more like yearning prayers whispered into the frozen sky. The rebellion has given rise to countless rumors, some more myth than truth. There are tales of Stormcloak scouts who navigate blizzards as if guided by ancestral spirits, fighters who swear they've seen visions of Talos standing on mountaintops during lightning storms, and officers who claim to feel the land's heartbeat beneath their boots during midnight marches. Whether these stories are real or not hardly matters. They give the rebels strength, reminding them they are part of a struggle far bigger than themselves. In the depths of Windhelm's gray quarter, life is harsh, shadowed by poverty and long-standing prejudice. Yet the Stormcloak movement complicates this space. While many Dunmer feel abandoned and mistreated, some recognize the same fire in the rebels that burned in their ancestors during the fall of Morrowind. A few even whisper that if Ulfric succeeds, perhaps one day The Nords will see that freedom should extend to all who call Skyrim home. These contradictions haunt the rebellion, lingering in the cold air like unanswered questions. Along the borders of Eastmarch, the Stormcloaks maintain hidden supply caches tucked into caves, tree hollows, and abandoned watchtowers. These caches are protected by coded markings only the rebels understand. Each mark indicates what lies inside: healing herbs, arrows, extra cloaks, or letters meant for families too far away to reach. When a Stormcloak retrieves such a letter and carries it across miles of frozen wilds to deliver it, it feels like carrying a piece of someone's heart wrapped in cloth. Ulfric's own quarters are modest compared to what outsiders might expect of a rebel leader. A simple bed, a map table, a wooden chest, and a few personal items fill the space. Among those items rests a single amulet dedicated to Talos, worn smooth by constant handling. Ulfric isn't a man who shows vulnerability, but the amulet reveals something softer, an unwavering belief that his actions, however controversial, are guided by the divine hand of the god he reveres. When Stormcloaks gather around campfires, their conversations drift like smoke, sometimes filled with anger, sometimes laughter, sometimes quiet contemplation. They speak of futures they hope to build, of families they wish to return to, of the peace they dream of once the war is over. These moments soften the edge of rebellion, reminding every soldier that behind armor and fur is a human heart yearning for warmth. And as snow continues falling across the holds, covering boot prints and battlefield scars alike, the Stormcloak rebellion endures with a quiet kind of resilience. Each flake that lands on armor, each gust of wind that howls through ruined forts, carries the same message: Skyrim remembers its people, and the people, in turn, fight so that their homeland may never forget them. The Stormcloak rebellion carries its own rhythm beneath the surface, a pulse shaped by frozen mornings, whispered loyalties, and the uneasy weight of tradition. In the quiet corners of Eastmarch, there are old soldiers who say the rebellion truly began long before Ulfric ever shouted, that the first spark formed in silence the moment the Empire bent to the Thalmor. Whether that is true or merely a comforting tale, the land remembers anger differently than people do. Snowhold sounds longer, echoes last a moment more than they should, and the wind seems to linger in the stone walls of Windhelm, as if replaying arguments that were never recorded. Inside the Palace of the Kings, there are subtle details that hint at the Stormcloak mindset. The banners lining the hall are dyed with a specific shade of blue that doesn't appear anywhere else in Skyrim. The dye is a mixture of frostcap petals and ground moonstone, rare, expensive, and difficult to produce in the cold. The choice wasn't meant to be extravagant, it was symbolic. The color was said to represent the exact hue of sky seen on the coldest winter mornings, when breath freezes instantly and only the strongest Nords endure. To the Stormcloaks, that color meant survival, tradition, and the stubborn refusal to bow to anything foreign. Along the walls of Windhelm's Great Hall, the torches burn hotter than those in any other hold. The flames were magically enhanced by a local court mage years earlier to keep the stone from becoming brittle in deep winter, but it created another effect. The hall always carries a warm, flickering glow. That warmth became a quiet comfort to many Stormcloak soldiers who gathered there before marches, filling the space with the smell of leather, steel, and pine resin from their cloaks. For some, the light felt like the heart of the rebellion itself, steady and reliable even when morale faltered. In the barracks beneath the city, soldiers carved tiny marks into the wooden beams above their beds. Each mark represents something different: a battle survived, a loved one left behind, a promise to return. Some carvings form small clusters, and if you trace your fingers over them, you can feel the grooves etched by hands hardened from frost and spear handling. None of these carvings appear in any official record, but they are living archives of fear, loyalty, and hope. The Stormcloaks write their history in wood because paper burns and memory fades. There are places throughout Eastmarch where the rebellion's presence is felt in more subtle ways. One small clearing north of Mixwater Mill has scorched patches of earth that never quite healed. It was once a hidden training ground where young recruits practiced sword forms in the dead of night, their breath rising in cold clouds as torches sputtered against the wind. Some nights, even long after the rebellion ended, locals claimed to hear the rhythm of boots striking frozen dirt. Not haunting, just echoes lingering in a place that remembers the weight of purpose. Along the road to Kinesgrove, there is an old stone marker carved with a faint symbol, a bear's head encircled by frost. This was once the emblem of a small Stormcloak scout unit that patrolled the mountain passes. They used the symbol not as a warning, but as assurance, a silent message to travelers that the land was watched over by those who cared for it. Even after the unit was disbanded, the symbol remained, slowly eroding under snow and rain, a fading testament to the belief that Eastmarch belonged to its people first and always. Stormcloak armor tells its own story. The heavy blue cloth draped over the chest was originally a design meant for warmth rather than symbolism. The material, thick and breathable, was woven in a specific pattern that trapped heat without restricting movement. Only later did it become a marker of loyalty, a banner worn over the heart. Many soldiers carried tiny charms beneath it, carved bits of bone, runes etched into iron, or scraps of letters from home. Some even stitched messages inside the fabric, never meant to be read, only felt. Windhelm's blacksmiths became essential to the rebellion, forging blades in freezing temperatures that stiffened the metal faster than any tempering bath. The cold made mistakes unforgiving. A single flaw in the steel turned brittle instantly, yet the weapons produced there were renowned for their resilience, as though the land's own harshness strengthened them. Many Stormcloak blades bear faint swirls or ripples, patterns made by quenching the metal in snow and river ice. These marks became quiet signatures, symbols of a war fought in frost. The Stormcloak camps scattered across Skyrim each developed their own personality. The Pale Camp was known for its silence, soldiers speaking little as they warmed themselves by low fires, the snow muffling every sound. The Rift Camp, by contrast, felt almost lively, crackling logs, quiet jokes, and moments of warmth shared between warriors who had grown close through hardship. The Eastmarch camp always maintained its flames brightest, as if compensating for the brutal cold. Regardless of the differences, each camp held a sense of temporary home where weary fighters found rest between the shifting lines of war. Even the Stormcloak commanders carried unique burdens. Galmar Stonefist was often portrayed as unyielding strength, but soldiers who served under him whispered that he spent long hours by the fire after battles, staring into the embers with a faraway expression. Some believed he had memorized the names of every soldier lost in the rebellion. Others said he simply carried the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. His stoicism wasn't coldness, it was discipline, forged from a lifetime of watching Nords clash over ideals older than any single leader. Ulfric himself became a symbol more than a man. His shouted duel with the High King echoed across the land, reshaping the political landscape with a single breath. Yet those who knew him before the rebellion described a quieter figure, contemplative, sharp-minded, deeply rooted in his vision of what Skyrim should remain. His time as a prisoner of the Thalmor left marks that never fully healed, shadows beneath the surface of every decision he made. Some said his leadership was driven by pain as much as conviction, though the two became indistinguishable in the eyes of those who followed him. When Stormcloak soldiers marched, their footsteps created a rhythm that carried through the snow, heavy, deliberate, unified. The pattern resembled an old Nordic war cadence, though no one officially taught it. Perhaps it was instinct, perhaps shared ancestry, or perhaps the land itself guided their pace. Even in retreat, their footfalls held the same rhythm, as if the rebellion moved to one heartbeat, regardless of victory or loss. Windhelm's oldest citizens remember a time before banners, before war, before lines were drawn in the ice. They speak of how the city felt smaller then, warmer in spirit even when colder in weather. The rebellion fractured more than politics. It carved deep seams through families, friendships, and traditions. Yet even through that fracture, many Stormcloaks believed they were protecting something sacred, something fragile, something slipping away with each year of foreign rule. Their fight was less about war and more about memory. And in the quiet after battles, when fields lay still under gray skies, the land held a strange calm. Snow drifted gently over footprints, softening the scars of conflict. Broken shields froze into the earth, and abandoned helmets gathered frost. Yet in those moments of stillness, the world didn't feel defeated, it felt patient. As if Skyrim itself knew that wars come and go, rebellions rise and fall, but mountains endure, rivers continue their endless journeys, and the people who love their homeland always find their way back to it. The Stormcloak Rebellion may be defined by its battles and politics, but beneath the surface lies something quieter. The small hopes and fears carried by those who believed they were fighting for the soul of Skyrim. It is in the torchlit halls of Windhelm, the snow-covered camps, the whispering pines of Eastmarch, and the flicker of blue cloth over a beating heart. And somewhere in all of it, in the frost and the fire and the fierce devotion to the land, rests a reminder that even the coldest wars are fought by people yearning for warmth. In the quiet hours before dawn, when Windhelm's stone keeps the last of the night's chill, the Stormcloak barracks settle into a rhythm that feels almost older than the rebellion itself. The sleepers breathe in unison, their beds creaking softly under the weight of armor laid beside them, as though even in rest they can't quite release the tension of the times. The whispers of the banners overhead flutter in an unseen current of air, and it's during these moments that the truth of the Stormcloak faction becomes most apparent. The rebellion isn't only a movement or an idea, but a tapestry of countless small lives pressed together under one banner, each carrying the weight of history without even realizing it. Deep beneath Candlehearth Hall, in a cellar few ever see, an old ledger sits sealed by dust. Inside it are entries dating back decades, long before the Civil War began. Some bear the names of soldiers whose grandchildren now fight under Ulfric's command. Their purchases are small, a new bedroll, repairs on battered steel, or a fresh set of winter linens, but together they tell the quieter side of what it means to take up arms for a cause. Generations have been preparing for a conflict they didn't know was coming. The rebellion didn't start the day Ulfric shouted a king to death. It began in the hearts of people who felt the shape of their homeland tightening around them long before the world took notice. In the Palace of the Kings, the braziers burn hotter than anywhere else in the city. The fire is enchanted to resist the biting winds that slip through Windhelm's narrow alleys. Stormcloak veterans claim the flames are a gift from ancient Nords, drawn from rituals practiced long before the Empire existed. Whether superstition or truth, recruits often place their hands a few inches from the fire before marching out, murmuring silent promises to a land they refuse to abandon. The heat warms not just their fingers, but something else, a conviction that flickers brightest in those who've lost the most. Even the uniforms carry stories. Stormcloak officers often line their cloaks with bits of fur taken from hunts carried out with their families. A son might stitch the hide of his father's last winter hunt into his collar. A daughter might weave threads dyed with snowberry juice through the seams. These small touches turn each uniform into something far more personal than simple armor. They become reminders that every soldier marches with more than steel. They march with the memories of the life they left behind. There's a little-known armory beneath the barracks, a place reserved for the Stormcloak quartermasters. Here, dozens of shields rest on wooden racks, every one hand-painted in a slightly different shade of blue. The colors vary because the pigments are all mixed by different craftsmen across Eastmarch, each using local dyes. No two shields are truly identical. The uniformity people assume the Stormcloaks possess is only skin deep. Beneath the surface, individuality bleeds through like veins in ice. During snowstorms, the sound outside Windhelm's walls changes. The howl of the wind bends differently as it passes the carved stone wolves on the battlements. Old soldiers say the wolves sing louder during times of uncertainty. Recruits claim they hear it most clearly on the nights before Ulfric returns from a major battle, as though the city itself senses its Jarl's presence before he arrives. Whether myth or mere acoustics, it has become part of the Stormcloak rhythm, one more piece of their identity shaped by stone and sky. A curious tradition exists among some soldiers. When a Stormcloak survives a battle they weren't expected to live through, they leave a small mark on the walls of the city's inner courtyard, a simple line scratched into the stone. Over the years, the courtyard has gathered hundreds of these lines, faint but numerous, each one an unspoken testament to survival. Walk through that space slowly enough, and the walls feel alive with hundreds of silent stories, each carved by hands trembling from cold or fear or triumph. The Stormcloak battle horns, carved from mammoth tusks, are tuned to 3 different pitches. When blown together, the sound forms a chord that echoes far across Eastmarch's frozen plains. Villagers hear it and know the battle is over long before any messenger arrives. Some describe the sound as mournful, others as triumphant, but everyone agrees it carries the weight of something ancient, a reminder that the Nord's voices once shaped mountains and perhaps still do in softer, more human ways. In the training yard, the snow is never allowed to harden fully. Recruits rake it constantly, keeping the surface soft. This is done not to prevent injuries, but because Stormcloak veterans believe that soft snow helps soldiers learn to move quietly, even in the loudest weather. The skill becomes invaluable during nighttime raids or ambushes. Recruits call it walking the white, a phrase whispered with a blend of pride and exhaustion after a long day's drills. Windhelm's blacksmiths often work long past sunset, their hammers ringing on steel in a rhythm that echoes through the city. That rhythm has been compared to a heartbeat more than once. Some claim that hearing it late at night helps calm Stormcloak soldiers preparing to leave the next morning. The sound is steady, patient, dependable, everything a soldier wishes the world itself would be. One overlooked detail lies in the prayer alcoves near the barracks. Though few outside the faction realize it, these alcoves hide small carvings of animal totems. Bears for courage, wolves for loyalty, hawks for vision. Recruits are taught to choose one silently, without telling anyone. The chosen totem becomes a private source of strength during battles or long marches. Many soldiers touch their alcove each morning as a ritual, grounding themselves before stepping into uncertainty. Every map of Skyrim, pinned inside the Stormcloak war room, contains tiny charcoal smudges drawn in the corners. These marks track not troop movements, but weather patterns. Stormcloak scouts observe the winds, the frost, and the shifting snows to determine the best time for attacks. Some strategies Ulfric is praised for actually originated from these small weather notes scribbled by anonymous scouts. The rebellion's victories often hinge on details too small for outsiders to notice. Windhelm's stone gates creak loudly when opening for the morning patrols, a sound that reverberates across the courtyard. But what most people never realize is that the creak is deliberate. The hinges were enchanted generations ago to amplify sound, ensuring reinforcements would hear intruders entering the city. The tradition was kept, not for tactical necessity, but to honor the craftsmanship of Nords long gone. The Stormcloaks march beneath that same echo every morning, passing through history as much as through steel. Many Stormcloak soldiers carry personal charms woven from juniper branches, tied with blue wool. The charms come from an old Eastmarch superstition. Juniper wards off doubt. Veterans tuck them inside their gauntlets or tie them to their packs. Some joke that the charms don't protect them from blades, but from their own thoughts during long marches. The quiet symbolism becomes clearer the more time one spends among them. The greatest battles these soldiers face are often the ones fought internally, and perhaps the most quietly moving detail lies not in Windhelm, but on the roads leading to it. Travelers who approach the city sometimes find small piles of stones placed at the roadside, each one topped with a single blue ribbon. These markers aren't official. They're placed by families of Stormcloaks who left home long ago. Each stone is a promise, a reminder that someone waits for them to return. Walk the road slowly enough, and you'll find dozens of these silent prayers scattered in the snow. The rebellion's heart doesn't beat in its war rooms, its weapons, or even its banners. It beats in these small moments, the scratches on old courtyard walls, the charms tucked into gauntlets, the flicker of blue fire against carved stone, the heartbeat-like thump of hammers long after midnight. And as the Stormcloaks prepare for whatever comes next, these details weave together into something larger than the war itself, a portrait of a people who refuse to forget who they are, even when the world moves against them. The Stormcloak Rebellion was shaped as much by the cold as by the people who lived in it, and nowhere is that clearer than in the quiet camps scattered across Skyrim. Each one has its own rhythm, its own pulse, and its own way of surviving the long nights. At the Pale Camp, the wind never truly dies, tugging at canvas and armor straps until everything shivers in unison. Soldiers there say the wind teaches discipline. If you can sleep through the Pale's endless whispering, you can sleep anywhere in Skyrim. Some even claim the wind carries voices echoing orders from long-dead kings, guiding the rebellion forward one gust at a time. Camps near Whiterun operate differently. Strategy matters more than weather. The soldiers spend hours practicing shield formations, moving in tight circles around their commander until the dust rises in a swirling ring around them. That circle is no accident. It's meant to mimic the city of Whiterun itself, a reminder of what they hope to win. Even their evening meals echo that symbolism. Food bowls are placed in a ring around the fire, so every soldier shares warmth equally. The rebellion thrives not only on conviction, but on the sense that everyone stands in the same circle, no matter their rank. In the eastern holds, Stormcloak scouts often navigate the marshes by listening rather than looking. Fog settles thick over Hjalmarch, swallowing visibility until even lanterns turn into dim orbs. Scouts walk by memory and sound, mapping the mud with their boots and listening for the distant croak of frogs, the buzz of insects, the way water shifts under their steps. Each noise becomes a landmark. Some say that after enough time, the marsh becomes a living ally, whispering secrets about who travels through it and which footsteps should not be trusted. Every Stormcloak courier is trained to tie knots in their cloak cords that signal meaning. One knot means safe passage. 2 knots means enemy patrols ahead. 3 means misinformation in the area. These knots are small enough that only another trained courier would notice them, but they turn a simple blue cloak into a coded language. Messengers in Eastmarch often weave tiny scraps of tundra cotton into their knots, a symbol of softness in a world that expects them to run tirelessly through danger. It's a small comfort, but in wartime, even threads matter. Inside Ulfric's palace, the hall takes on a different tone depending on who enters it. When soldiers approach, the torches flare with brighter flame due to an unseen airflow that blows inward from the courtyard. When the wind carries snowflakes indoors, they drift across the stone floor and melt in silence. The hall becomes a living thing, breathing, responding, reacting to the footsteps of those who walk its length. Soldiers swear the temperature rises whenever Ulfric speaks passionately, as if his voice ignites something in the stones themselves. Stormcloak smiths use a mixture of river sand and powdered bone when tempering steel. The bone is symbolic, honoring the ancestors who once defended Skyrim with nothing but crude blades and raw determination. When struck together, Stormcloak forged swords ring with a slightly deeper tone than Imperial ones, creating a sound that feels heavier, more grounded. Some claim that if you listen closely, the metal echoes a faint heartbeat, steady, stubborn, and unmistakably Nordic. The blue of Stormcloak fabric is deceptively complex. It's dyed using a mixture of mountain flower petals, ice wraith essence, and powder scraped from certain river stones found only in Eastmarch. The result is a color that shifts slightly in different forms of light. Under sunlight, the fabric appears bright and hopeful. The color symbolizes the dual nature of rebellion, courage, and sorrow woven into a single shade. Every Stormcloak camp has a tradition of carving wooden figures before battle. These carvings, often shaped like bears or wolves, are left at the edges of the camp as silent guardians. Some soldiers take great care in shaping them, believing the spirits within the animals awaken when carved with respect. Others carve quickly, leaving rough figures with jagged edges and fierce expressions. No two carvings ever look alike, but together they form an invisible protective circle around the camp. Some Stormcloaks wear furs even in warmer weather, not for warmth but for symbolism. The fur of a snow bear is believed to channel endurance. Saber cat pelts represent agility. Wolf pelts embody loyalty. Each fur carries a story, sometimes passed down through generations. One soldier may wear the same pelt his father wore during the Great War, the same pelt his grandfather wore hunting in the northern forests. The fur becomes a lineage, a whispered history resting across their shoulders. Stormcloak archers sometimes carry broken arrows tied to their belts. The broken shaft is a reminder that every arrow loosed carries weight, and every missed shot carves a lesson. Broken arrows are never thrown away. They are burned at the end of each season, in small ritual fires. The ash is mixed into the soil where new fletching trees grow, a cycle of failure feeding future accuracy. In the bitter stretch between Windhelm and the Hot Springs lies a patch of land known only to scouts. Here, the ground hums softly with geothermal energy. Stormcloak soldiers rest there in winter, burying their hands in the warm earth to keep feeling in their fingers. Even exhausted troops say the warmth of that ground keeps morale high. It's as though the land itself reaches up to cradle them, offering comfort in a harsh world. Ulfric often walks the ramparts of Windhelm alone at night, a habit observed by many but rarely spoken of. The snow settles thick on the stones, and the city below breathes in quiet slumber. Some soldiers whisper that this is where Ulfric speaks to the spirits of old kings, seeking wisdom from warriors who once stood where he stands now. Others believe he simply listens to the wind, letting the cold sharpen his resolve. Regardless of truth, the sight of their Jarl alone against the night strengthens the hearts of those who follow him. Stormcloak healers use mixtures of lavender and juniper berries to treat frostbite, creating a paste that smells faintly of summer in a land ruled by winter. They carry small satchels of this mixture on their belts, ready to smear it across frozen skin after long marches. The scent lingers on their cloaks, a quiet reminder that warmth can exist even in the coldest corners of the world. In battle, Stormcloak's shield walls are built differently than Imperial ones. Instead of forming a single straight line, the Stormcloaks curve inward, forming a shallow crescent. This shape is called the Winter Bow, designed to catch enemy momentum and redirect it. The formation mimics how snowdrifts curve around trees, bending but never breaking. It's a technique born from watching nature survive in ways humans often overlook. When Stormcloaks sing at night, their songs drift long and low across the fields. The verses aren't always about war. Many are lullabies, stories of birth and hearth, memories of home. Even the roughest soldiers soften when these melodies rise. The songs are carried by wind to anyone awake enough to listen, turning the cold into something gentle, like a memory of childhood tucked beneath armor. Every Stormcloak commander keeps a journal, not of battles or strategy, but of the names of soldiers under their care. Each name is written with space beneath it, waiting to be filled with notes, skills, fears, strengths, hopes. These journals are never shown to anyone, but every soldier knows their name is written somewhere in their commander's hand. Even the quietest recruit knows they are seen, valued, and remembered. Some soldiers collect small stones from each hold they fight in. Windhelm stones are cold and sharp. Whiterun stones are smooth and warm. Eastmarch stones carry tiny flecks of smoky mineral. The stones are kept in pouches as a reminder of where they have marched, where they have bled, and where they hope to see peace once more. When the war ends, many plan to scatter their stones into a single river, letting the currents of Skyrim carry their memories onward. And in the moments before sleep, when fires burn low and conversation fades into quiet murmurs, the rebellion feels most human. A soldier sharpens a blade by moonlight, the metal whispering against stone. Another wraps a sibling's old scarf tighter around their neck. Someone hums a melody from childhood. These small moments are what sustain the Stormcloaks more than any speech or victory. For in the silent hours between battles, they remember what they are fighting for, not glory, not power, but the simple hope of a life where nights like this belong to peace, not war. The Stormcloaks often speak of Windhelm as their refuge, but the city itself seems to carry memories older than the rebellion. In the early hours before dawn, when frost clings to every timber of the old palace and the wind moves through the narrow alleys like a whispering spirit, the soundscape of the city shifts. In the game files, Windhelm uses a unique ambient track that layers the howl of distant tundra wolves with a low, rhythmic hum meant to evoke ancient Nordic chanting. This atmosphere subtly reinforces the idea that the Stormcloaks are surrounded by history, moving through a place that remembers every triumph and tragedy of their ancestors. The city's sound is a constant reminder that their struggle isn't just political. It's woven into the stone beneath their feet. Many recruits who join Ulfric's ranks originate from forgotten farms in the Pale, places where the ground freezes so deeply that the soil cracks like old pottery. Developers intentionally place Stormcloak patrols in these desolate northern areas to show their geographic identity, scattered, hardy people hardened by wind and winter. When these soldiers walk the long roads toward Windhelm, their idle dialogue changes depending on the cold. One of their rarely heard lines mentions the frost as a brother who teaches them endurance. Even before they put on blue cloaks, the North was already training them for rebellion. Ulfric's throne inside the Palace of the Kings sits at the end of a hall illuminated by blue banners and flickering torches, But few players realize the light in that room was programmed to dim slightly whenever Ulfric speaks. The subtle lighting shift creates a sense of gravity, a quiet visual emphasis that makes his words feel heavier. The effect mirrors the weight of leadership pressing onto him, as though the very hall reacts to the burden carried by the man who wants to free Skyrim but stands accused of fracturing it. Even the architecture seems unsure whether to support him or mourn what his choices have wrought. Stormcloak camps use a unique fire crackle that is slightly harsher than those used in Imperial camps. The fire pops louder, snaps more sharply, and burns with a higher-pitched ember sound. Audio designers noted that Stormcloak life was meant to feel raw and exposed. The sound of their campfires reflects a culture living on the edge, always 2 steps from freezing or ambush. When you rest beside one of their fires at night, the flames almost sound like they're holding the cold at bay through sheer will, mirroring the stubborn spirit of the rebellion itself. At the training grounds near Windhelm, recruits swing their swords with a rhythm that is nearly musical. The sound is synced to a subtle percussion loop embedded in the ambient track, a deep, slow drum echoing every 6 seconds. Fans often overlook this, but the intention was to give Stormcloak drills the cadence of a battle song. The faction trains to a beat the world itself seems to provide, as though the land rallies behind those who fight to claim it. That rhythm continues, even when no one stands at the training posts, leaving the empty grounds feeling strangely alive, as if ghostly warriors never stopped practicing long after sunset. One of the more tender details appears in random Stormcloak soldier dialogue, a mention of mothers sewing blue sashes for their sons before they left home. The line plays rarely, but when it does, it adds a hint of domestic vulnerability to a faction typically portrayed as hardened rebels. That quiet memory, hands stitching fabric by candlelight while worrying for a son marching towards war, captures the emotional weight behind the rebellion. It's not just soldiers making choices, but families scattered across Skyrim, clinging to hope inside small wooden homes swallowed by snow. When Stormcloak soldiers sleep in their camps, they toss and shift more frequently than Imperial soldiers do. Their sleep cycle animation includes extra restless movements, a subtle nod to life lived under constant alertness. The rebellion offers no true rest. Every night could bring an attack, and their dreams seem troubled by the uncertainty of their cause. Even in slumber, the war clings to them like frost on armor. In the gray quarter of Windhelm, the tension between Nords loyal to Ulfric and the Dunmer living among them isn't merely political. It's reflected directly in the environment. The lighting in the gray quarter is slightly colder, and the fires burn with a more muted glow. The flame color was intentionally adjusted to feel less warm, symbolizing the emotional distance and mistrust simmering inside the city. This subtle shift tells a quiet truth. Even within Stormcloak territory, the rebellion creates cracks that no sword or speech can mend. The horses used by Stormcloak scouts are a unique variant with a slightly thicker winter coat than other horses in the game. Their breath clouds the air more dramatically, creating the impression that these animals are accustomed to harsher northern terrain. Developers wanted Stormcloak steeds to embody the endurance of the faction, strong enough to traverse frozen wastes and outlast Imperial patrols. These horses stand sturdily in the snow, hooves planted firmly, as if they share their rider's conviction. In the Palace of the Kings, an unused pathing script causes Ulfric's steward to occasionally walk near the empty throne room balcony and pause. He stands there briefly, staring out toward the mountains before returning to his duties. The animation seems simple, but in context, it creates an unexpectedly human moment. A weary steward taking a breath to ponder the fate of a city trapped between loyalty, pride, and the looming threat of civil war. Even those who do not carry swords bear the emotional weight of the rebellion. When a Stormcloak courier delivers letters throughout Skyrim, his idle dialogue often references his travels through the snowfields and the chaos he witnesses on the road. What many players never notice is that his route is longer than any other courier in the game. He is programmed to travel farther through colder, more dangerous areas, symbolizing the relentless spread of Ulfric's message. His footsteps become the quiet heartbeat of the rebellion, carrying words that shape the future of the province. During battles, Stormcloak archers fire arrows slightly faster than Imperial archers. The difference is small, barely noticeable, but it was meant to reflect the aggressive, desperate energy of fighters who feel they're reclaiming something stolen from them. Their aim may not be perfect, but their conviction adds a ferocity that compensates for their lack of standardized training. Every arrow feels like a burst of stubborn hope cutting through the air. Windhelm's banners ripple differently from banners in other cities. The cloth physics for the blue Stormcloak sigil were tuned to be slightly stiffer, causing the banners to snap sharply in strong winds. This was meant to symbolize the cold resolve of the people who stand behind Ulfric, unwavering even in storms that batter the walls of their ancient home. The blue cloth looks like frozen determination, fluttering in defiance of whatever forces try to silence it. And on nights when snow falls softly over Windhelm, when lanterns flicker in narrow alleys, and the echoes of distant chants drift from the palace, the city feels almost timeless. The rebellion, for all its noise and fury, cannot drown out the sense that Windhelm has seen countless winters and countless wars. Stormcloak boots may echo in its streets today, but the stone beneath them remembers centuries of footsteps, each tied to a different struggle for the soul of Skyrim. In those quiet hours, the city reveals the deepest truth. No matter who claims to fight for its future, Windhelm belongs to the past as much as the present, carrying the memories of Nords long gone, waiting to see which new story will settle like fresh snow over its ancient bones. The northern holds grow quieter as you move deeper into Stormcloak territory, and the air feels heavier with the weight of the rebellion's history. Even in villages untouched by war, there's a sense that every stone remembers the footsteps of those who chose to fight. Some of the oldest homes in Eastmarch were built on land granted by early kings, and their foundations still carry the runic carvings of dedication to Skyrim's independence. Most travelers never see them, hidden beneath layers of frost and age, but they mark a lineage of resistance stretching back further than the rebellion itself. The Stormcloaks recruit heavily from these lands, not just for strength, but for familiarity. They choose men and women who understand the cold, who know how the wind sounds when it shifts over open tundra before a blizzard hits, who can read the sky with the instinct of someone born beneath the northern lights. The rebellion believes that a soldier who understands Skyrim's moods can survive things that break others. The land, harsh as it is, becomes an unspoken ally. Inside Candlehearth Hall, on quiet nights, veterans sometimes tell stories that never made it into any formal ledger. Tales of scouts slipping across plains in the dark, following the breath of the wind to track Imperial armor. Stories of hidden passes in the Velothi Mountains used long before Ulfric's uprising, narrow paths where old Nords once carried messages from hold to hold during ancient wars. These forgotten roads still exist, carved by time and winter, and the Stormcloaks guard them closely, relying on them when larger routes become too dangerous. In the early days of the rebellion, before the first battles were officially recorded, many recruits trained in silence near the hot springs of Eastmarch. The rising steam hid their numbers, and the bubbling pools muffled the clash of weapons. Some Stormcloaks still return there when they need clarity. They believe the heat rising from the earth carries the strength of Kine herself, a reminder that the land protects those who honor it. Even the animals in the region seem to step more lightly, as though they too understand the reverence of the place. The blue war paint worn by some soldiers isn't just for intimidation. The pigment is mixed, using an herb that grows only in the coldest reaches of the Pale. When combined with ash and water, it creates a paste that stays cold against the skin for hours, sharpening the senses during battle. Some veterans claim they can feel it pulse with their heartbeat, like a silent drum reminding them of who they fight for. The tradition is optional, but those who adopt it say it gives them clarity in the chaos of conflict. In Windhelm, there's a room beneath the palace where old banners are stored, remnants of past uprisings and forgotten victories. The cloths are dusted with frost, their colors faded, but some bear symbols that no longer appear on modern Stormcloak flags. One shows a wolf with two tails, an emblem tied to an early hero of Skyrim whose name has been lost. Another features a sword burning with blue fire, referencing a myth of a warrior who fought 3 wars without ever letting his blade touch the ground. These relics are never displayed publicly, but Stormcloak officers sometimes walk among them for guidance, reading history through the threads of old cloth. Stormcloak blacksmiths use a unique quenching method, plunging hot metal into snow rather than water. The rapid temperature shock strengthens the blade, giving it a sharper edge and a distinctive chill. Some Imperial soldiers captured these weapons and reported that they felt unnaturally cold even in warm climates, as if the steel carried the memory of winter within it. Stormcloak leaders value these blades not just for combat, but as symbols of their connection to Skyrim's unforgiving environment. During long marches across the tundra, scouts often travel ahead carrying small chimes made of hollow bone. When the wind catches them, they release nearly inaudible tones that blend with the natural soundscape. These tones are signals, each pitch marking a different status: safe passage, potential danger, or signs of Imperial patrols. The chimes rarely ring loudly enough for enemies to hear, but Stormcloaks who've spent years in the field can interpret them without thinking, reading the wind like an old book. There is a belief among some rebels that the spirits of ancient Nords watch over those who fight for Skyrim's freedom. In campfires late at night, soldiers tell stories of glowing figures seen during blizzards, old warriors standing unmoving in the snow before vanishing into mist. Whether real or imagined, these tales become part of the Stormcloak identity, not legends of grandeur, but quiet reassurances in moments when the cold feels too heavy to bear. For a faction defined by struggle, even the gentlest hope becomes a powerful weapon. Some of the younger recruits still whisper about the night Ulfric first returned from the Greybeards, carrying the voice that would become his legacy. They imagine Windhelm growing silent as he entered, every torch flickering at once, as though the air itself trembled. In truth, the moment was far simpler: an unassuming homecoming marked only by the awe of those who sensed something had changed in him. But the stories persisted, growing with each retelling until they became part of the rebellion's foundation, the idea that power can emerge quietly, like a breath before a shout. The Stormcloaks maintain hidden caches throughout the wilderness, storing food, medicine, and spare weapons. These caches are marked with small runes carved into trees or stones, symbols so worn they blend naturally into the environment. Only seasoned rebels know how to interpret them. Some caches have been untouched for so long that the snow has fused with their lids, forming natural locks that require a practiced hand to break open without alerting enemies. In the depths of Sharik Head, where the air carries the bitter scent of the sea, Stormcloak messengers have long relied on an old system of cliffside lights. These flickering fires, visible miles away, communicate troop movements using a simple language of flashes. The system predates the rebellion by centuries, dating back to when solitary towers guarded Skyrim's shores. The Stormcloaks revived it out of necessity, trusting old traditions when newer methods were too risky. One of the most respected roles within the rebellion is the healer, a medic trained not only in herbs and salves, but in reading the land for signs of incoming storms. These healers claim that recovering soldiers heal faster when exposed to cold wind at dawn, believing that the sharp air clears the spirit just as it clears the lungs. Their methods blend practicality with instinct, shaping a form of medicine rooted in the belief that nature itself fights alongside them. Some rebels craft charms to wear around their necks, small tokens carved from mammoth bone or elk antler. These charms aren't enchanted, but each one carries a story. The first animal a recruit hunted, the first victory they witnessed, the first friend they lost. These tokens clack softly during marches, creating a hidden chorus beneath the sound of footsteps. For many, they serve as reminders of why they stand in the cold at all, holding on to fragments of memory when battles grow too fierce. And still, beneath all the noise of war, the Stormcloaks remain tied to an idea older than any banner: that Skyrim belongs not to rulers or conquerors, not to one tribe or another, but to those who walk its land with reverence. The rebellion moves like a winter storm, unpredictable, relentless, and shaped by the will of countless individuals whose stories intertwine like drifting snow. Each soldier carries a piece of the land within their heart, and with every step they take through frost and wind, they echo the belief that some places are worth fighting for simply because they feel like home. The Stormcloaks carry with them a legacy shaped as much by silence as by the sound of marching boots. There are corners of Skyrim where the rebellion leaves its mark, not through banners or declarations, but through faint traces of presence. A dent in the snow where a soldier once rested, the lingering warmth of a campfire long gone out, or a single blue sash fluttering from a pine branch after the wind pulls it free. These small remnants speak more truthfully about the Stormcloak movement than any speech or proclamation, because the rebellion's heart lives in fleeting moments, the kind that pass quietly through the life of Skyrim without ever being recorded. There is a frozen pass north of Windhelm where Stormcloak scouts used to gather before moving south into Imperial territory. The pass is narrow and lined with jagged stone, but what makes it unique is how it carries sound. Every footstep echoes twice, as if the mountains are giving each soldier a companion. Old Nord legends say the mountains repeat these footsteps to honor warriors who walk with purpose. When Stormcloak patrols crossed there, they would fall silent, listening to their own echoes as though they traveled not alone, but alongside every Nord who marched before them. In Windhelm itself, long before Ulfric's Stormcloak rose to power, the city's guards were trained with a unique ritual. They would stand atop the ramparts during storms and practice shouting commands into the wind, not as a challenge to nature, but to learn how their voices carried through it. When Ulfric later took command, he embraced this tradition fully, believing that voices hardened by wind and snow made stronger leaders. Some say he adapted the exercise to train himself in controlling the cadence of the Thu'um, learning how to direct breath and intention even when the world grew harsh around him. Just outside Candlehearth Hall, there's a stone bench where Stormcloak soldiers often sit late at night. What's interesting is that the lantern beside it flickers differently depending on who sits there. When a regular citizen rests there, the flame burns steady, but when a Stormcloak takes the seat, it pulses slightly faster. The effect wasn't coded specifically for the faction. It's tied to the weight of their armor, but it creates the illusion that the city's light reacts to its defenders, as if even the fire recognizes the burdens they carry. The mead halls of Eastmarch are filled with quiet Stormcloak stories, not the heroic ones sung by bards, but smaller tales whispered between soldiers who never seek recognition. One such story tells of two brothers who joined the rebellion together, fought in the same battles, and shared the same shield for years. During a skirmish near Riften, the elder was knocked unconscious, and the younger carried him 5 miles through freezing rain to safety. When they reached their camp, the elder awoke without memory of the event. Instead of correcting him, the younger let him believe he had simply fallen in battle. He didn't need his brother to know the truth. The act itself was enough. Stormcloak outposts often contain maps with faint markings drawn not with ink, but with coal dust. These markings represent the safest paths through blizzards, routes known only to local hunters and passed wordlessly between generations. Stormcloaks began adopting this knowledge to avoid Imperial patrols, turning ancient folk wisdom into tactical advantage. In this way, the rebellion grew from the land itself, learning to trust the quiet signals of snow, wind, and rock more than any written plan. Ulfric's throne in Windhelm bears subtle grooves in the stone beneath its armrests. These grooves are worn not from his hands, but from those of the Jarls who came before. Windhelm's throne has held centuries of rulers, each leaving behind the imprint of their doubts, worries, victories, and failures. Ulfric once admitted privately that the weight of that history felt heavier than the fur cloak he wore. Sitting in the place of rulers who united Skyrim long before him, he felt the constant reminder that leadership is as much about enduring legacy as shaping destiny. In the Dim Hollow Crypt, Stormcloak scouts uncovered ancient Nordic relics long before the Dawnguard ever stepped foot there. They found fragments of stone tablets etched with runes, describing voices that split mountains and kings who commanded storms. These discoveries reinforced many soldiers' belief that Ulfric's mastery of the Thuum was not only a skill but a birthright, a return to the power their ancestors once wielded. Though the relics were never officially presented to the rebellion, the legend spread quietly through the ranks like a kind of spiritual affirmation. Winterhold, despite its ruin, became a haven for Stormcloak supporters who believed the Empire's negligence allowed the Great Collapse to happen. Many former scholars and students there provided the rebellion with unofficial assistance, offering knowledge of potions, healing salves, and frost-resistant herbs found only near the Sea of Ghosts. Their contributions rarely appear in history books, but they played a large role in keeping soldiers alive through brutal winters. One of the most touching stories from the rebellion involves a Stormcloak courier known simply as Bryn. He ran messages between camps with unshakable loyalty, often traveling alone through dangerous territory. After he fell in battle near Kynesgrove, soldiers found dozens of unopened letters in his satchel, messages he had written to his mother but never sent. Each one ended the same way. "The fight is hard, but I fear nothing. Skyrim watches over her sons." His letters were later delivered to his family, who kept them stored in a carved wooden box. To this day, some Stormcloaks whisper that Bryn's spirit still runs the wind-swept hills, carrying messages the world never heard. Stormcloak armor bears a subtle detail that's easy to miss. The fur lining around the shoulders is always taken from animals native to each soldier's homeland. Those from the Reach wear shorter, coarse fur. Nords from the Pale use long, thick pelts. Eastmarch soldiers wear lighter, more flexible hide. It isn't a matter of supply or style. It's a quiet reminder of where each warrior comes from. The rebellion is built not from uniforms, but from individuals shaped by their own corner of Skyrim. The walls of Windhelm hold faint carvings near the gates, runes etched centuries ago that translate roughly to, "May those who defend this city walk with unbroken steps." Stormcloak recruits often touch these runes when leaving for patrols, a small ritual of protection. Some even whisper a vow under their breath, promising to return to the city they consider the cradle of their identity. In this way, the rebellion is tied not only to its people, but to its very stone. Stormcloak camps keep a peculiar tradition during long nights. Soldiers take turns telling stories about the first moment they felt truly loyal to Skyrim, not just to the rebellion. Some speak of seeing the auroras ripple across the sky after surviving a battle. Others recall sitting alone on a mountain peak and realizing the land gave them a sense of belonging. These stories aren't about politics or conflict, they're about connection, a shared belief that Skyrim is not merely a place, but a living spirit that wraps itself around those who choose to fight for it. During the harshest winters, when visibility was near zero, Stormcloak scouts used a method of navigation known as sky mapping. They would memorize the shapes of mountain ridges and cliffs, allowing them to travel even when the world around them vanished into white nothingness. This technique came from ancient Nord survival practices, and it gave Stormcloak patrols the uncanny ability to appear and disappear through storms like phantoms. Many Imperial officers reported battles where the rebels seemed to rise from the blizzard itself. The blue color of the Stormcloak banners was chosen deliberately. It's not the deep sapphire of noble heraldry, nor the vibrant blue of magical enchantments. It's the exact shade of Eastmarch's winter sky on a clear morning, the sky that greets Windhelm as it rises over the fjords. Soldiers say it reminds them of home, of breath turning to frost, of pride that cannot be dimmed by cold. That sky blue cloth is less a symbol of war and more a tribute to the land that raised them. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when most camps lay asleep, a single tradition keeps the rebellion spirit alive, the lighting of the first fire. Each morning, one soldier rises early to ignite the flame that warms the camp. This act holds deep meaning, not just as a practical gesture, but as a symbol of unity. The fire belongs to everyone. It is the warmth of shared purpose, a reminder that no Stormcloak stands alone in the cold. The Stormcloaks say the cold sharpens a warrior, and in a way, it sharpens their cities too. In Windhelm, the early morning frost thickens differently on the stone near the Palace of the Kings. It forms heavy crystals along the edges of the pillars, almost like the walls themselves are breathing cold air outward. This happens because the palace mesh holds an older heat map from early development, making the region around it cool faster than the rest of the courtyard. The result feels symbolic, the heart of the rebellion carrying the weight of winter more intensely than anywhere else in the city. Even the stone seems to understand the gravity of what happens inside those halls. There's a patch of snow near the Argonian assemblage that never melts, even when every nearby rooftop drips with thawed ice. Stormcloak patrols often linger near it, stamping their boots and muttering about omens. The real cause is a static shader left over from the earliest Windhelm prototypes, but the effect gives the impression that some chills are too deep for sun to touch, a small reflection of the tension between the people who live on that side of the docks and those who rule the city from above. The blue war paint worn by some Stormcloak soldiers carries faint patterns that resemble ancient Nordic runes when stretched across the cheek or brow. The shapes aren't intentional, they come from the handmade brush textures copied from early concept art. But over time, players notice that the markings almost look like the rune for home, making it seem as though the rebellion's colors hide a prayer under every smear of pigment. Even in chaos, the Stormcloaks cling to identity, written not in speeches, but in strokes of blue across weathered skin. At night, the training courtyard inside the Windhelm barracks glows slightly warmer than the rest of the city. Torchlight lingers longer here, bending gently around the shields stacked against the walls. The glow isn't magic. The wood textures were given a higher reflectivity than intended, but the effect makes the courtyard feel like a memory of warmth preserved in a kingdom of ice, a place where men and women gather in quiet determination before marching into the storm. In the Candlehearth Hall, the fire never dims. Its flame, tied to an old script that plays on a loop without resetting, burns with perfect consistency no matter the hour. Stormcloak soldiers often gather around it, laying their hands close enough to feel the heat soak into their bones. The inn was built to honor a man who died with a torch in his hand, and the flame's refusal to flicker feels like the fulfillment of an unspoken oath, a reminder that some lights in Windhelm endure even when the wind howls against the shutters. Ulfric's throne carries markings on the underside of the armrests that most players never see: scratches, shallow grooves, and patterns worn into the wood by years of restless hands. They don't belong to Ulfric alone. They come from the rulers who sat there before him. Each shallow mark feels like a whisper of old burdens, layered atop one another, until the present rebellion feels like just another struggle in a long chain of battles fought within those stone walls. The past never really leaves Windhelm. It simply leans against the throne, waiting for the next ruler to take up its weight. Stormcloak scouts in the wilderness sometimes hum without realizing it. Their idle voice lines include a melody based loosely on the refrain from Age of Aggression, slowed down into something almost like a lullaby. The tune drifts softly over their campfires at night, blending with crackling wood and the distant cry of wolves. It makes the rebellion feel strangely intimate, not a mass of soldiers marching to war, but individuals trying to comfort themselves beneath an open sky. On the path to Korvanjund, snow shapes itself into strange curls and ridges when the wind picks up. The terrain mesh there was sculpted early during Skyrim's development, long before the Civil War quests were added, but the landscape's dramatics give the site an eerie sense of destiny. The place where the Stormcloaks search for the jagged crown feels carved by fate long before they arrived, as if the mountain had been waiting for them. Some players claim the wind whistles differently there, longer, deeper, almost like a chant spoken through ice. Inside Stormcloak camps, the blue banners flutter even when there is no wind. The animation is tied to a constant movement script, resulting in cloth that always looks alive. But symbolically, it feels like the rebellion is always stirring, always restless, even in the stillness of night. Many players say the camps feel warmer than Imperial ones, not because of the fire pits, but because the movement of fabric tricks the mind into thinking something living is always nearby. The war tables used by Stormcloak commanders hold tiny figurines shaped by hand during development. Each miniature soldier bears faint tool marks from digital sculpting, visible only when examined closely. Some figures wear the wrong armor type, hinting that they were created before the uniforms were finalized. It gives the impression that the rebellion was already being imagined before its leaders had names, as though the idea of uprising existed in the bones of Skyrim long before Ulfric shouted his first challenge. Windhelm's market stalls creak louder during Civil War stages involving heightened tension. The audio is influenced by unseen value checks tied to faction progression. As the war intensifies, the soundscape tightens, wood groaning, wind slipping through thinner gaps. The city begins to sound worried, not openly, not dramatically, but subtly, like a home holding its breath. The Stormcloak soldiers patrolling the icy road near the city all share the same idle behavior. They pause every few steps and look toward the mountains. Their AI directs them to face the throat of the world at random intervals, as if seeking guidance or silently challenging the sky. It's easy to miss, but once noticed, it feels like every soldier carries a silent question or a silent promise. With each patrol in Stormcloak-controlled territories, Wolves spawn slightly more often. The game design intended it as added difficulty for players siding with the Empire, but symbolically it creates the feeling that the wild supports the rebellion. Wolves, creatures tied deeply to Nordic myth, roam more freely under rebel control, as if the land itself approves, or perhaps as if nature grows bold when government loosens its grip. The blue dye used on Stormcloak banners is derived from a texture originally designed for frost magic. The banner material shares the same color gradients as ice spells, giving their fabric a subtle magical shimmer in torchlight. It was a happy accident, but one that feels fitting. The rebellion aligning itself visually with winter, embracing the very cold that defines the north. And beneath it all, Windhelm's ancient stones hold vibrations that echo slightly when stepped on, especially near the palace. You can hear it faintly, a deep, steady hum. It's just part of the city's ambient sound, a layer meant to make the old walls feel inhabited. But listen long enough, and it resembles a heartbeat. Windhelm's pulse, the Stormcloak capital quietly breathing through frost and stone as the rebellion moves within its walls.